The enemy forces look to the skies and see a horde of incoming aircraft. Panic sets in as they fire blindly, desperately trying to take down the oncoming swarm. But as the fleet draws closer, the real nightmare begins. Bombs drop and kamikaze drones slam into high-value targets with deadly precision. But this is no ordinary attack. There isn't a single pilot in the US fleet. Every craft is remotely controlled, guided by artificial intelligence to execute the mission flawlessly. This is the future of aerial combat. Its name is Project Skyborg, and we're going to dig into what this project is and why America's enemies are so terrified of this powerful aerial threat in this episode of the Infographic Show. Back in 2020, the US Air Force announced the Vanguard program. At the time, nobody knew exactly what it was, only that it was part of the Air Force's transformational science and technology portfolio, a key piece of the military's 2030 strategy. Then, more details emerged from the Air Force Research Laboratory, or AFRL. The Vanguard initiative would focus on developing cutting-edge weapon systems and warfighting concepts, blending experimentation with next-gen technology. Its mission? To take bold, unproven ideas and turn them into fully functional combat assets. These prototypes wouldn't just be theories on paper. They would be refined, weaponized, and deployed to give America's warfighters the most advanced tools to devastate its enemies. The Vanguard program launched with 3 key initiatives: Navigation Technology Satellite 3, Golden Horde, and an AI-driven project known as Skyborg. According to General Arnold W. Bunch Jr., commander at Air Force Materiel Command, these programs had the potential to transform America's warfighting capabilities and change the way we fight and the way we employ air and space power. These are game-changing technologies that will challenge what our opponents think about us, how they react to us, and ultimately pull them off their game, Bunch Jr. said. It's a terrifying reality for America's enemies. The US isn't just keeping up with modern warfare, it's developing technologies that will make existing defenses obsolete. All 3 Vanguard projects are true game-changers in modern warfare. Golden Horde is a networked autonomous weapon system that allows multiple technologies to work together in coordinated attacks. Each weapon in the Horde can communicate, share, and analyze data in real time, making tactical decisions that no previous weapon system has been capable of. Navigation Technology Satellite 3, or NTS-3, enhances America's space-based positioning and navigation systems. It integrates spacecraft, ground control, and agile software, paving the way for a new generation of GPS receivers. This means tomorrow's fighters will have even more precise tools to locate and eliminate their targets with unmatched accuracy. And then there is Skyborg, the headline act of the trio. Skyborg represents the next leap forward in America's aerial warfare capabilities. Instead of relying on piloted fighter jets to eliminate targets, the US is developing a new generation of unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs. Traditional drones require human operators, exposing their users to risk and limiting coordination to what human crews can manage. Skyborg changes that by integrating UAV technology with artificial intelligence. Skyborg allows autonomous drones to cooperate, adapt, and destroy targets without direct human input. And that's not all. If a human element is introduced, Skyborg will enable manned aircraft to control and coordinate UAVs, with AI assisting in navigation and target acquisition, making every mission faster, deadlier, and more efficient. It's a scary concept for America's enemies. Skyborg opens them up to attacks from aerial assets that are just as capable of kamikaze attacks against their defenses as they are of running coordinated assaults from the air. With the human element gone, there is no risk to pilots. Using Skyborg, the US can take on what would have been risky targets in the past without losing the people who are so valuable to its Air Force. The US Air Force is taking the Vanguard program very seriously. In late 2020, it called for further investment into the program, with $157.6 million requested for fiscal year 2021. Around $40.9 million of that money was dedicated to Skyborg, which the Air Force had taken to calling a wingman drone. More hints about what the system would be able to do came from that moniker. Imagine a UAV that can fly alongside a fighter pilot. At a moment's notice, that pilot can send the drone to conduct reconnaissance or use it to boost their own jet's combat prowess. Throw AI into the mix, and the drone can act autonomously. With no commands from the pilot, it could track down targets, send data back, and attack either in coordination or separately from the fighter jet to which it's linked. Skyborg would be the perfect wingman, and it's not even piloted by a human. By late 2020, Skyborg project development was in full swing. 4 companies were contracted to start initial development on the concept. Boeing, Kratos, Northrop Grumman, and General Atomics. They were tasked with developing early concepts and prototypes with a $400 million U.S. Air Force contract hanging in the balance as their designs advanced toward flight experiments in 2021. By late 2020, the goal was clear: create an AI-powered wingman drone that would be combat-ready by the end of 2023. Initial efforts were encouraging, though not without technical setbacks. One of the early frontrunners for the Skyborg project was the XQ-58A Valkyrie, a joint development between Kratos and the AFRL. The Valkyrie showed promising signs until the summer of 2020, when a July test flight ran into trouble. A fault in its rocket-assisted takeoff system caused the UAV to initiate liftoff prematurely during pre-flight checks, only to crash down in front of its own launch rails. Luckily, the drone wasn't extensively damaged, but the mishap forced the AFRL to cancel a planned test later that month. America's enemies might have seen that incident as a sign that Skyborg was doomed to fail. But a project this ambitious was bound to face setbacks, and the Valkyrie would make its return soon enough. By September 2020, the U.S. Air Force was getting more serious about developing Skyborg and its related technologies. In that month, it announced a $400 million shared ceiling contract that would see 12 different contractors compete for their slice of the Skyborg pie. Among them were BAE Systems, Next Gen Aeronautics, Autonodyne, and AeroVironment Inc. Blue Force Technologies and Lockheed Martin also had their hats thrown into the ring, as did Kansas's Wichita State University, and even contracts were incoming. In December 2020, the U.S. Department of Defense, DoD, also announced that it had awarded a shared ceiling $400 million indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract to Volley Defense Solutions for all of its competitively selected delivery orders related to the project. But why focus on Skyborg at all? In the past, the U.S. Air Force has relied on two primary strategies to expand and enhance its capabilities. The first was acquiring new aircraft, investing in advanced, long-lasting jets designed to maintain air superiority for decades. The second approach focused on stockpiling expensive single-use weapons, like precision-guided cruise missiles designed to be fired once and never recovered. And that caused a glaring problem. A lot of money was being spent. In 2020 alone, the year Skyborg was announced, the $165.6 billion request for Skyborg was a 6% increase on its request for the 2019 financial year. That was almost a quarter of America's entire $714 billion defense budget for the year. This suggested that the two approaches the Air Force took to maintaining and growing its power were starting to become a drain on resources. The Air Force needed a way to maximize firepower while minimizing costs. It needed a new force multiplier that could strengthen its capabilities without draining its budget. By developing a family of UAVs that could not only fly sorties, but were also cheap enough to deploy in high-threat environments where enemy aerial defenses posed a serious risk of attrition, the Air Force found its game-changer. Skyborg would be a brand new threat for America's enemies to take on. When the drones hit their targets, they would destroy key enemy assets and minimize the enemy's ability to conduct war. However, even if the drones were unsuccessful, they would still serve a critical purpose, forcing America's enemies to burn through valuable, expensive ammunition from their defense systems. Every intercepted drone would drain enemy resources, weakening their defenses and potentially leaving the path open for follow-up attacks in the future. The idea was to create a lose-lose situation for America's enemies. Either fail to stop Skyborg and see your assets get destroyed, or shoot the UAVs out of the skies only to have to face more incoming attacks while your defenses are weakened. And worse yet for America's enemies, a successful hit against a Skyborg drone wouldn't result in a human casualty. The U.S. Air Force gets to keep its most valuable pilots safe for missions that aren't suitable for Skyborg drones, meaning the enemy accomplishes very little if it does manage to defeat a UAV. Successfully taking down a UAV wouldn't be a major victory for America's enemies, because Skyborg's biggest advantage is its low cost. Each drone in the Skyborg system is designed to fly between 10 and 100 sorties, but with some key differences from traditional U.S. Air Force aircraft. These UAVs are attritable, built with shorter lifespans than fighter jets and bombers, meaning less money spent on maintenance and greater flexibility to take on high-risk missions. They'll also have low unit costs of between a couple $1 million and $20 million. Though that is still expensive, that outlay is a drop in the ocean compared to the $109 million spent on each F-35 Lightning II, for example. Then, there is the ongoing maintenance that those more complex manned fighter jets require. The drones would also be reusable, which gives them a massive advantage over single-use systems, such as cruise missiles, The Valkyrie drone we mentioned earlier is a perfect example. It's equipped with a parachute that allows it to safely descend back to base after a mission, allowing it to be reused for as many missions as its lifespan enables. But most important of all is the technology behind the UAVs. The prospect of facing a horde of powerful drones is terrifying enough for America's enemies. But when you take modularity and AI into consideration, Skyborg becomes a threat from which there is no escape. The U.S. Air Force has created Skyborg to operate with a plug-and-play design architecture that allows the UAVs to work alongside multiple other attacking assets, as well as making them usable for several mission types: reconnaissance, direct strikes, and even sacrificing themselves as decoys to allow for more powerful munitions to penetrate enemy defenses are all within Skyborg's capabilities. As for the AI, well, that allows the Air Force to simply provide key goals to Skyborg, such as taking out a specific threat, and it'll be capable of operating on its own. And that AI technology will only get better. Using machine learning integrated across the entire Skyborg network, these drones continuously learn from every mission. Each encounter helps them develop new strategies, refine tactics, and better identify threats, making them smarter, deadlier, and more effective with every sortie. And that spells disaster for America's enemies. The US has developed powerful UAVs that are intelligent enough to learn from their missions and cheap enough to be considered expendable. The drones can be packed with explosive payloads and have no human pilots, meaning a successful kill shot doesn't damage the US as much as it would have in the past. When combined with piloted systems, Skyborg creates a force multiplier unlike anything the US enemy has ever seen before. And it's no longer going to be a single fighter jet or a bomber that aerial defenses have to detect. It's that single piloted jet along with a swarm of drones that are every bit as capable as the pilot of destroying an enemy target. Okay, so this is all starting to sound like something from a sci-fi movie. Skyborg is ambitious, no doubt, but is it truly feasible? Will we really see autonomous drone swarms attacking US enemies anytime soon? Well, this technology is advancing far faster than anyone thought possible. Skyborg has already completed its first successful test flight. In May 2021, the U.S. Air Force announced that Skyborg's Autonomy Core system, which governs the AI the drones use to attack their targets, was not only operational, but had passed its first test with flying colors. Using a Kratos-designed UTAP-22 UAV, the Skyborg leadership team successfully conducted a 2-hour and 10-minute test flight at Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida. During the test, Skyborg demonstrated several key capabilities essential for safe and effective autonomous flight. The system proved it could fly without human assistance and respond to navigational commands in real time. It also showed that it could adhere to aircraft flight envelopes, meaning that it can maintain formation, coordinate with other aircraft, and execute more complex maneuvers, all critical for future AI-driven combat missions. Another series of tests took place in the UK in July 2022, this time involving the Valkyrie drones. The announcement of the successful test also marked the first public announcement of Valkyrie flying as a part of the Skyborg program. According to Senior Vice President of Kratos' Unmanned Systems Division, Jeffrey Harrow, the July 2022 tests represented a proof of concept for Skyborg. In other words, the system worked. By August 2022, the U.S. Air Force had gained enough confidence in its AI-powered drones to declare them ready to graduate and integrate into other major Air Force programs, such as the Next Generation Air Dominance or NGAD family. Reimagining aerial warfare is a top priority for the U.S., but Skyborg isn't here to replace human pilots. The Air Force's official stance is clear. AI isn't designed to take jobs from pilots or operational specialists. Skyborg will instead be capable of assisting the U.S. to become even more air dominant. Each Skyborg drone will have a subsonic or supersonic engine, meaning they'll either come close to or exceed the speed of sound when in operation. They'll also transform the Finger 4 fighter aircraft formation that has been used since the 1930s. That formation typically sees 4 fighter jets flying together, which is a serious cost risk for the U.S. As we mentioned earlier, the F-35 Lightning II comes with a price tag of over $100 million per jet. That means a 4-jet formation represents nearly $500 million in hardware, a massive investment that could be wiped out in an instant if targeted by enemy forces. And that is without counting the single-use missiles and the other munitions on board, along with the costs associated with training and keeping up the pilots. Finger 4 is now being adapted, where once it involved 4 fighter jets, it will now consist of 1 piloted fighter and 3 Skyborg UAVs. These AI-powered drones will fly in formation, using their intelligence to analyze telemetry, create flight plans, assess weather conditions, acquire targets, and act as autonomous wingmen. This allows the human pilot to focus entirely on the mission, a shift that should send a shudder down the spines of America's enemies. A Russian or Chinese fighter pilot has to deal with all of that themselves. What chance do they have facing off against American pilots who are hyper-focused on taking them out and have a small unit of powerful drones to ensure they get the job done? Beyond these practical questions, America's opponents also have to consider what Skyborg truly represents. Air and Space Forces points out that the U.S. Air Force has faced decades of budget cuts in the run-up to the announcement of the Skyborg program. That may seem like a strange claim, given that we mentioned earlier the Air Force receives over $160 billion per year. But in comparison to what it should be receiving, that number is smaller than it could be. These budget cuts were great news for the likes of Russia and China. Beijing in particular has spent that time investing heavily in its own aerial assets. It still doesn't have as many aircraft as the US in total, however it's close to achieving parity on the fighter jet front with over 1,200 jets compared to America's 1,800. Russia has far fewer with 830 jets, but imagine a scenario where China and Russia join forces against the US, a possibility that would put America in a dangerously tight spot, especially as Air Force budget cuts continue to strain resources. Its resources would be stretched thin in the event of a war, both in terms of its attacking force and its ability to defend the homeland. Skyborg changes all that. The low cost of the UAVs in this advanced system allows the US to focus on expanding its fleet of 5th-generation fighters and bombers, while reducing investment in older 4th-generation aircraft. Since AI-powered drones handle the support operations, the US can spend less, deploy more, and minimize risk, all while maintaining air superiority. Meanwhile, China and Russia must continue spending heavily to field a comparable number of fighter jets. But with Skyborg acting as a force multiplier, the US gains a strategic and financial advantage that makes every dollar count. Then, there is the missile threat posed by China and Russia to consider. Both of America's biggest enemies have thousands of long-range missiles they could use to destroy key American assets in the event of a war. China alone is estimated to have a stockpile of at least 400 intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs, that are both accurate and capable of traveling to the United States. Russia has even more. As of 2021, it had 16,000 R-36 Satan missiles and tens of thousands of additional ICBMs in various models. These missiles could destroy America's aerial capabilities. They are powerful enough to crater runways and destroy fuel storage facilities at American bases not just in the US, but around the world. The US maintains around 750 bases spread across 80 countries, all of which it needs to protect with a combination of aerial and naval assets. A US enemy would naturally target as many of those bases as possible with missiles, cutting the US off in terms of its capacity to respond to incoming aerial threats. Skyborg changes the game in that department. It provides the US with the ability to rapidly create the hundreds of sorties that would be needed to halt a Chinese or Russian missile attack. The drones the system uses can launch faster than a fighter jet, with their AI allowing them to target incoming missiles. Those that survive their sorties can be recovered and reused, maximizing their value. Meanwhile, their defensive actions enhance the survivability of US military bases and the critical assets stored within them, providing an extra layer of protection against enemy attacks. Worse yet for Russia and China, they would be forced to fly more sorties and launch extra missiles just to inflict meaningful damage. Skyborg provides the US with a dual advantage, neutralizing incoming threats while also draining enemy resources at a much faster rate than a traditional conflict. Combine that with the portability of Skyborg drones' containerized launchers, and you get a highly transportable weapon that can be deployed far more easily than a fighter jet. Even aerial refueling needs are reduced. Skyborg UAVs that have ranges of 3,000 nautical miles or higher could hit the Russian or Chinese targets and fly back to base without ever needing to call on any of the 605 aerial tankers the US Air Force has in its fleet. All of this leaves us with one more question. What does the future hold for Skyborg? That immediate answer is that the project no longer exists. But before America's enemies can get too excited about that, Skyborg hasn't disappeared. Rather, the research and development for the project has been successfully concluded, allowing Skyborg to be rolled into the Collaborative Combat Aircraft, or CCA program. CCA is a key part of the NGAD program that we mentioned earlier, which will result in the United States developing the first ever 6th-generation fighter jet. NGAD is an extremely secretive project that was initiated in 2014, around 5 years before Skyborg, and it's planned for service entry in 2030. It involves the development of a new combat jet that uses advanced engines made using next-generation adaptive propulsion, or NGAP technology. Those engines are still under development, though Pratt & Whitney concluded a joint evaluation of NGAP alongside the U.S. Air Force in February of 2024 that proves the technology is viable. The NGAD fighter jet will be capable of conducting counter-air missions, including air-to-air fighting and strikes against ground-based targets. Beyond that, little is known about this 6th-gen fighter jet, though it's speculated that the jet may be capable of reaching speeds of up to Mach 5, which is 3,800 miles per hour, with a range of 1,800 miles and a ceiling of 60,000 feet. Each NGAD fighter will be accompanied by a set of CCAs, developed through the Skyborg research program. Those autonomous drones will have the capacity to receive direct commands from the NGAD pilot, or operate independently using advanced AI systems. Equipped with munitions, electronic warfare packages, or advanced sensors, CCAs will be highly versatile and adaptable to various missions. More importantly, they'll be significantly cheaper than a $300 million NGAD fighter, making them a cost-effective force multiplier in future air combat. In other words, a CCA is everything that Skyborg promised to be in all but name. China's first 5th-generation fighter jet only entered service in 2017, with all of its efforts since then being focused on 6th-generation fighters. With the combination of NGAD and the Skyborg-inspired CCAs, the US is now an entire generation of aerial warfare ahead of its enemies, making it a far more capable aerial threat than it's ever been before. But there's still work to be done. NGAD isn't yet operational, which means the CCAs also aren't taking to the skies. But beyond the technology, there's a difficult moral question to confront. Who's pulling the trigger when a UAV can autonomously decide to attack a target? But none of this takes away from one simple fact. Skyborg, in its new guise as a CCA, is ready to go. America's enemies don't have a single piece of technology that can compare. Do you think autonomous drones like Skyborg will redefine aerial combat? How could America's enemies possibly counter this game-changing technology? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Now go check out why China is terrified of US new manta ray submarine, or click on this video instead.